It was in the autumn of a year now long past that a certain adventure, which had remained locked in my dispatch box for reasons of high policy, first came to the notice of Sherlock Holmes and myself.
The morning in question broke dull and grey over Baker Street, and a fine drizzle traced wavering lines upon the window panes, while the monotonous rattle of the traffic came dimly from the direction of the Marylebone Road. Holmes sat curled in his familiar armchair upon the left of the fire, his long limbs drawn together, his thin fingers pressed tips to tips, and his keen grey eyes set not upon any object in the room, but upon some inner picture known only to himself. The blue wreaths from his pipe drifted slowly upward to the yellowed ceiling, and hung there like vague phantoms of vanished cases. For myself, I had that morning completed some notes upon a small affair of domestic jealousy in Wapping, and the labour done, I was content to bask in the warmth of the fire, and to taste for a little space the rare luxury of complete idleness. I remember that Holmes had spoken scarcely a word since breakfast, and that I had begun to suspect one of those periods of black reaction, which sometimes followed the more strenuous of his intellectual exertions. I was about to rally him upon his silence when there came the sharp sound of a cab drawing up before the door and the quick, decided tread of a man upon the steps. A moment later Mrs.
Hudson ushered in a visitor whose aspect stamped him at once as a government official of no slight importance.
"The gentleman for you, sir."
The newcomer was a man perhaps on the hither side of 40, spare and sallow, with the stoop of one who has spent his life over papers, and the ink stain upon his forefinger that is the badge of his profession. His clothes were well cut, though somewhat neglected, as though the body within were too occupied with weightier matters to take much heed of its outer shell.
He clutched a leather dispatch case with a hand that trembled slightly, and his eyes, dark and rather sunken, had that strained, sleepless look which I have seen more than once in men upon whom great responsibility pressed heavily.
"Mr. Holmes, I presume."
Pray be seated, sir, and let me relieve you of that case.
"I am indebted to you."
Our visitor sank into the armchair opposite Holmes, and for an instant his gaze took in the littered chemical table, the violin in its corner, and the untidy heap of newspapers upon the sofa, with that quick comprehensive glance which belongs to the man of affairs.
Then his eyes returned to Holmes, and I saw a flicker of hope cross his anxious features.
You have come from Whitehall this morning, I think, and the fog upon the river gave you some little trouble.
"You amaze me."
It is the commonplace rather than the wonderful that amazes Mr. Charles Elphinstone of the Foreign Office.
Our visitor started as if a spring had been touched, and his hand flew again to the leather case upon his knees.
"Since you know my name, Mr. Holmes, you will guess that my business is of a nature which scarcely admits of delay."
I might surmise that even without the evidence of the dispatch case and of your face, which has not known a full night of sleep these 3 days.
"I will not waste your time by asking how you know that. I have been sent to you, Mr. Holmes, by a minister whose name I may not utter upon a matter which concerns the credit of our government and, if mishandled, might even touch the peace of Europe."
Holmes inclined his head slightly, and I could see that some spark had leapt in his languid eye.
Pray proceed, Mr. Elphinstone.
Our visitor drew a long breath and settled himself more firmly in his chair, as a swimmer might brace himself for a plunge into cold water.
"You are aware, Mr. Holmes, that there are certain small estates with whom we seek to maintain a friendly understanding, not so much for their own intrinsic importance as for the check which they may afford to the ambitions of greater powers."
You allude to a certain Balkan principality, which lies across the path of more than one ambitious neighbour.
"I am instructed neither to confirm nor to deny, but I perceive that I need not labour the geography. For some months past a commercial convention of considerable magnitude has been in negotiation between our government and that state, with the object of securing to our merchants certain mineral concessions of the utmost value and of opening a fresh market for the coal of South Wales."
I saw at once that we were upon the threshold of one of those affairs in which Holmes so delighted, and in which I, as a humble chronicler, have always felt my pen to be all too feeble for the task.
"The matter was necessarily conducted with great secrecy. The preliminary articles having been drafted in London, it was decided that the final discussion and the initialing of the draft should take place not in the capital of that state, where every movement is watched, but in some quiet and secluded spot upon our own soil. A hunting lodge in a remote mountainous district of North Wales was selected as offering both isolation and a reason for the presence of a small party of gentlemen whose occupations might otherwise have excited remark.
Holmes had sunk back in his chair, his lids drooping until they almost veiled his eyes, yet I knew well that every word was sinking into that singular brain and being stored there in its appointed pigeonhole.
Ahead of the mission was Sir Alastair Phelps, a baronet of good family who has for some years rendered valuable services in various diplomatic capacities. He is a man of charm and of much natural ability, but I must confess, Mr. Holmes, that he is not without his weaknesses. He has been a somewhat reckless patron of the turf and of the card table, and rumour has been busy with his debts.
We shall not quarrel with rumour there, since I observe upon your face that you know more than you choose to say.
Let it suffice that Sir Alastair has been in low water, and that the Foreign Office has more than once deemed it prudent to assist him in matters of temporary embarrassment.
There was a certain dryness in Holmes's smile which did not escape me.
With Sir Alastair there went down to the lodge a young clerk named Harold Lewis, whose duty it was to keep the minutes and to prepare fair copies of the articles, together with the usual small staff of servants. Sir Alastair was accompanied also by a friend of his, introduced merely as Mr. Victor Hall, a gentleman who professed a passion for mountaineering and for photographing wild scenery, and who, I am bound to say, appears to have been of great service in choosing and traversing the more perilous paths.
The name seemed to leave no trace upon the memory of my companion, for he did not change his attitude by the fraction of an inch.
The draft convention, when not in discussion, was kept in a steel box in a small study which opened by a single door into Sir Alastair's bedroom. The study had but one window, and that looked sheer down into the ravine, a drop of 100 feet or more to the torrent below. The architect's plan of the house, which is upon record, shows solid rock behind the wall upon which the strong box stood. You will understand that these details, trivial as they may sound, have a grave importance.
On the contrary, they interest me exceedingly.
Holmes's voice had taken on that dry, crisp edge which always told me that his mind was moving swiftly.
The key of that box never left Sir Alastair's person. He is a man, for all his follies, of punctilious habits in such matters, and he declares that he slept with it beneath his pillow. From the moment when the draft was placed within the box until it was removed at the close of the conference, someone, whether Sir Alastair himself or the young clerk or one of the servants, was always within sight or hearing of the only door that leads to the study. Yet, despite these precautions, Mr. Holmes, the document which now lies in our Foreign Office safe is not the document that was first placed in that box. A vital article has been altered, and altered in such fashion that the advantage passes from our merchants to those of a rival power.
He brought his hand down heavily upon the arm of the chair, and his voice shook for an instant with the intensity of his feeling.
The forgery has been discovered only by the closest comparison of the draft with the cipher minutes, and the hand that did it was one of extraordinary skill. If this comes to light, Sir Alastair will be ruined and the government discredited, yet it is possible that he is himself the victim of a plot.
And you come to us because in the absence of a visible door you suspect a hidden one.
I come to you because the matter passes the wit of the department, and because there is talk of casting the whole weight upon Sir Alastair in order to save appearances. I have never believed him capable of treachery, though I admit that his peccadilloes render him a dangerous guardian of secrets.
There are other names upon which suspicion has fallen, no doubt.
The young clerk had the skill of penmanship, but he is a nervous, timid creature who almost swoons at the raising of a voice. The servants are local people of good repute and were never alone with the papers. There remains only Sir Alastair's so-called friend, Mr. Victor Hall, who, so far as the Foreign Office is concerned, is but a cipher.
You have brought with you, I perceive, certain objects which you consider to bear upon the case.
I have here the architect's plan of the lodge, the cipher minutes, and, at your request conveyed through our common acquaintance, a packet of photographs taken by Mr. Hall during the visit.
As he spoke, he drew from the case a roll of tracing paper, a bundle of foolscap, and a stout envelope, which he laid upon the table. Holmes rose languidly, stretched out his long arms, and then bent over the table with an eagerness which contrasted strangely with his former listlessness.
You're an admirable messenger, Mr. Elphinstone. You bring with you the very things which I should have asked for.
He spread the architect's plan upon the cloth, weighting the corners with the salt cellar and the spirit case, and glanced rapidly along the penciled lines and measurements.
A small house clinging to a steep hillside with one face almost overhanging a ravine. Interesting, Watson, is it not?
I admitted that the situation appeared picturesque and perilous.
The study here behind Sir Alastair's bedroom with its single window upon the drop. The strong box against the inner wall. The architect is precise and emphatic that here there is solid rock. And yet a forgery has been achieved.
He turned next to the packet of photographs and began to run them swiftly through his fingers, pausing an instant at one, frowning at another, and murmuring to himself in that rapid undertone which I have heard where he followed the spoor of some subtle scent.
This is of consequence.
He laid aside one print and continued his examination.
When he had finished, he returned to it, holding it at arm's length, and then closed his eyes, while his keen gaze travelled from the faces in the foreground to the peaks that towered in the distance.
Here we have Sir Alastair with our friend Mr. Elphinstone beside him. Here is the nervous clerk, and here, if I mistake not, the enterprising Mr. Victor Hall with his camera case at his feet.
The photographs showed, as he described, a group of gentlemen standing upon a long balcony before a line of windows, the vast hollow of the mountain valley opening behind them, with its scattered pines and tumbling stream.
You will oblige me, Watson, by comparing the line of those far peaks with the indications upon the plan.
I bent over the table, and did as he desired, though with no clear notion of his aim. To my eyes the photograph was but a pleasing view of rugged scenery and well-dressed men.
Observe, Watson, that from the balcony as shown upon the plan, one could not possibly obtain that particular alignment of the ridge. The angle would be wrong by many degrees. The photographer is standing further out and somewhat higher than any balcony marked by the architect.
I confess that even then the significance did not at once break upon me.
We have here a picture, Mr. Elphinstone, which appears to have been taken from a point exterior to the house, and yet, according to your plan, quite unattainable without the aid of winds. When a man goes to the trouble of taking his stand in the impossible, it is usually that he has some excellent reason for desiring a particular point of view.
You think then that the mischief lies in the structure of the house itself?
I think that there is more of interest in your mountain lodge than its proprietor has thought fit to place upon the public record. You will do well, Mr. Elphinstone, to return to your office and to say that Mr. Sherlock Holmes will be ready to start for North Wales by the afternoon train. Bring with you, if you please, the architect's plan, the photographs, and such authority as will give us free access to the house and the right to question all who are present.
You give me hope, Mr. Holmes, where I had begun almost to despair. The train leaves Euston at 3, and I shall meet you there with all that you require.
When our visitor had taken his leave, with an air visibly less burdened than when he came, I turned eagerly to my companion.
His gaunt face bore that peculiar inward light which I have learned to associate with the prospect of a worthy problem.
The languor had fallen from him, and he moved with quick, light steps about the room, filling his case with shag tobacco, thrusting a few papers into his pocket, and making the small preparations which precede our more serious expeditions.
I asked him what he had already deduced.
We know as yet very little, my dear Watson, and can therefore deduce still less. We have, however, as you will have observed, the convergence of 3 lines of probability. We have a document of great importance, altered by an almost perfect forgery. We have the assurance of those in charge that no one could have entered the room where it was kept, and we have the evidence of this photograph that there exists about the house some uncorded feature of its construction. Lastly, we have the presence in the party of one unknown man whose ostensible pretext for being there is his passion for dangerous positions and for the use of a camera. You will agree that the field narrows appreciably.
I could not deny the force of his reasoning, though I ventured to suggest that Sir Alastair's debts furnished a very obvious motive.
Motives, my dear Watson, are as plentiful as blackberries in September. Opportunity is the rarer fruit, and it is with opportunity that we must first concern ourselves. Come, the game is afoot once more, and the mountain air may do something for your practice as well as for my spirits.
It was thus that, a few hours later, we found ourselves speeding northward from the smoky sprawl of London towards the wilder country where our task awaited us.
Mr.
Elphinstone joined us at the station, pale and careworn, but fortified by the minister's formal letter which gave us full powers to act in the name of the department.
During the long journey he entered more into particulars, and I gathered the impression of an honest public servant sorely harassed by the follies of those above him. He told us of Sir Alastair's earlier diplomatic successes, of his charm, and his brilliant talk of the whispers that followed him from club to club, of sign notes renewed and renewed again, of a name no longer spoken by certain honourable families.
The picture he drew was that of a man standing upon the crumbling brink of ruin, yet not wholly lost, not without a certain gallant quality even in his weakness. Of Mr. Victor Hoy could tell us little beyond the fact that he had met him as Sir Alastair's guest on 2 previous occasions at a certain well-known pub in Pall Mall, that he was quite of manner of independent means so far as any one knew, and singularly at home upon rock and snow.
The train bore us at last into a land of steep hills and narrow valleys, where grey stone farms clung like limpet shells to the slopes and little streams flashed in the hollows.
At a small mountain station we descended, and a rough country cart with a shaggy pony was in waiting to convey us and our modest luggage up the pass.
The road wound ever upward between wet rock walls tufted with fern, while the mists hung low upon the heights and drifted in long white streamers across the dark face of the hills. The air grew keen and full of that strange hush which belongs to high places, where common sounds seem remote and trivial. Holmes sat beside the driver, his eyes wandering from crag to crag and from the slopes to the ravines below with an attention which I knew to be more than that of a casual tourist. At length, at a turning of the road, the lodge came into view, clinging as it were to the very side of the mountain, its long line of windows blinking out over the great hollow and its wooden balconies projecting above the grey gulf.
It was a house of 2 stories, built partly of stone and partly of dark weather timber, with a steep slate roof and a squat chimney from which a thin line of smoke drifted sideways upon the wind. A narrow cart track led up to it and ended abruptly at a small yard where a dog barked and a short, sturdy woman stood shading her eyes with a work-worn hand.
You will be the gentleman from London, I make no doubt.
Her accent betrayed her Welsh birth, but her manner had something of the self-possession of one who has seen more than the valley folk, doubtless from attendance upon successive shooting parties.
We are here by authority of the government, madam, and we desire to see Sir Alastair Phelps at once.
Sir Alastair is within, sir, but he has been sore put about these last days, and I know not if he will receive strangers.
He will receive us. Pray show us in.
The housekeeper, for such she appeared, obeyed with a little bob of a curtsy, and led the way by a flagged passage to a large, low-roofed room which served as a kind of hall or common sitting-room. Here, before a wide hearth where a peat fire glowed upon the dogs, a gentleman rose from a chair as we entered. He was a man of middle height, inclining to stoutness, with carefully brushed fair hair now thinning upon the temples, and a florid face, which had once been handsomely cut, but was now marred by those subtle lines which indulgence and anxiety to get right upon the human countenance. His clothes were of country tweed, but the cut and attire at his throat proclaimed the man of fashion.
Mr. Holmes, I presume?
And Dr. Watson at your service.
They warned me from London that you were coming. You find me, Mr. Holmes, in as bitter a plight as ever befell a gentleman, and whatever you may discover cannot, I think, render my position worse than it is.
He sank back into his chair with a weary gesture, and I noted how his hand groped blindly for the glass upon the table, though the wine within it remained untouched.
We are not here, Sir Alastair, to condemn, but to discover the truth. You will assist us best by answering with absolute frankness any questions that I may put to you.
I shall keep nothing back, for there is little left me now but my honour, and even that hangs by a thread.
You had heavy obligations at the time of this mission.
The whole world knows it, and you may as well. I have been a fool, Mr. Holmes, a fool at cards and horses and other things which a man had best leave alone. Yet I swear to you that, fool as I have been with my own fortune, I have never sold my country for gold.
I am prepared to believe you until I have reason to think otherwise. We shall wish presently to examine the study in which your strong box was placed, and the box itself if it remains as it was. In the meantime, there is one point upon which you may enlighten me. This Mr. Victor Holt accompanied you. How came he to be of your party?
I met Hall at the Travellers and afterwards at the club in Pall Mall. He's a quiet fellow, well-read, with a taste for out-of-the-way places and dangerous paths. When I spoke of the lodge and the hills about it, he showed the greatest interest, and I confessed that I was glad of a companion who could relieve the tedium of the thing. The minister raised no objection to my taking a friend who was not officially connected with the mission so long as he had no dealings with the state in question.
You are sure upon that last point?
He gave me his word, and it never occurred to me to doubt it.
He is no longer here, I understand.
He left 2 days after the conference upon the pretext of some Alpine engagement abroad. I have heard nothing from him since.
Holmes's lip tightened slightly, and I saw that the flight of Hall had deepened the shade in which he viewed the gentleman.
We will now, if you please, see the room in which the papers were kept.
Sir Alastair rose and led the way up the narrow stair, which turned sharply upon itself and opened upon a corridor running along the front of the house. At one point, a door upon the right gave access to a bedroom comfortably furnished in a somewhat florid taste, and beyond this again was the smaller chamber which had served as a study. It was a plain little room with a writing table, a chair, a bare scrap of carpet, and a single tall window that looked out upon the terrible drop of the ravine, where the stream gleamed far below like a white thread between the black boulders.
Against the inner wall, beneath the hanging of a faded print, there stood a square steel box somewhat larger than that, which a banker uses for his more precious documents.
Its keyhole showed in front, and its back was close pressed to the panelling.
This is the box.
The same, Mr. Holmes, and as for the key, here it is upon my watch chain, as it has been since we returned to London.
Holmes stooped and examined the floor about the box, the skirting board, and the lower part of the wall with that minuteness which is so characteristic of him. Then he moved to the window and threw it open, leaning out with a disregard for the fearful depth below which brought the colour to my cheeks. The sheer face of rock fell away beneath us, streaked with trickling water, and tufted here and there with a stunted shrub that had contrived to gain a footing in some narrow crevice. No bird even passed between us and the opposite side.
You perceive, Watson, that the architect is justified in his complacency. No human being could hope to gain that sill from without and remain a human being.
He drew in his head and stood for some moments measuring with his eye the distances of the room.
The plan accords with the reality so far as concerns the length and breadth of this room. It will be interesting to see whether the house as a whole is equally obedient to its own portrait.
We descended once more to the hall, and Holmes asked for the complete freedom of the building.
I will trouble you, Sir Alastair, to leave us for a while to our own devices, and to instruct your servants that they are to answer any questions which we may put. Dr. Watson and I will then occupy ourselves for an hour or two.
You shall command here as if the house were your own.
Sir Alastair bowed with a mixture of relief and apprehension and withdrew.
Holmes at once produced from his pocket a small compass and measuring tape and a notebook and began a systematic exploration of the house.
We passed from room to room, up and downstairs, along passages and through little lobbies, Holmes muttering figures and making rapid entries as he went.
More than once he bade me place my hand against a wall to feel the draught that issued faintly from some crack, or to note how the sound of a step in one place echoed more distinctly than in another.
You observe, Watson, that the corridor above appears from the outside to traverse a greater length of wall than is shown upon the plan. There is, in short, more house than the architect has thought fit to mention.
The discovery, which I should never have made unaided, was evident enough when Holmes pointed it out.
From the yard below one could see at a glance that the upper story projected some feet further over the ravine than the windows of the corridor would suggest. Within, the passage appeared normal and gave no hint of concealment, yet there remained that surplus of space for which no account had been rendered. It was the same, though in lesser degree, upon the lower floor.
The face presented to the valley jutted out in such fashion that, had one trusted the plan, one might almost have believed that the house hung in mid-air.
Holmes spent some time in conversation with the housekeeper, from whom he learned that the lodge had originally been a small shooting box of stone only, and that some years before the proprietor, desiring larger quarters and more impressive accommodation, had had it extended outward over the cliff by means of strong timber supports.
There were workmen here for months, sir, and they had scaffolding put up along the whole face of the rock. My late husband, who was a handy man, helped them with it, and he would say that there were spaces left behind the walls where a man might crawl if he had the courage.
Your late husband was an observant fellow, Mrs. Price, and his remarks do him credit.
Holmes pressed her for more details, but she could tell him little beyond the fact that certain portions of the old scaffolding had been left in place and boarded over since it was thought that they might again be useful in future repairs. With this information he appeared well satisfied. The afternoon had by now turned to evening, and a chill wind came sobbing about the corners of the house, bringing with it a faint patter of rain. We supped in company with Sir Alastair and Mr. Elphinstone, the talk turning for the most part upon indifferent matters, though I could not but note how the younger man watched Holmes with an anxious side glance, as though he strove to read his fate in that impassive face. After supper Holmes expressed a desire to see certain of the photographs again, and they were spread upon the table beneath the lamp.
This one and this one, if you please.
He placed together the group upon the balcony, and a view which showed the house from the side, with the jutting upper story and the rough timber beneath.
Here, Watson, you will perceive at the point from which our friend Mr. Hall took his more ambitious study cannot be the balcony alone. The angle at which the opposite ridge appears above the roof reveals that he must have stood some feet further outward and higher. Where then did he stand?
I confess my inability to answer.
Where indeed, unless upon some portion of the abandoned scaffolding of which Mrs. Price has told us. If that scaffolding, or part of it, has been boarded in, we may find the shell of a gallery where the plan shows only a wall.
Sir Alastair stared at him in amazement.
Do you mean, Mr. Holmes, that there is some secret way along the face of that cliff?
I mean that the builder has taken liberties with the plan, and that a man who knows where to press his hand may perhaps step out into the very air, at least so far as appearances go. You retired late on the night before the closing of the conference, I understand.
It was a wild night, Mr. Holmes, with the wind crying about the house and the rain beating upon the windows. We sat over the fire until after 12, Hall and Lewis and I. Elphinstone had retired earlier to write his notes, and the servants had gone to their rooms.
You undressed in your bedroom and placed the key of the box under your pillow.
As I have sworn again and again.
You heard nothing in the night.
Nothing save the noise of the storm, which was loud enough to drown a cannon.
Very good. Now, Watson, if you're not too weary with your days climbing the pony cart, I think that a little further exploration will not come amiss.
There was that in his tone which told me that some definite step was at hand, and I felt my old excitement rising within me as we took candles and followed him once more up the stair. Sir Alastair and Mr. Elphinstone would have accompanied us, but Holmes waved them back.
We shall do better alone at first.
We passed along the corridor where the wind found its way under the ill-fitting windows and made the candle flames bow in unison. At a point opposite Sir Alastair's bedroom, Holmes halted and examined the panelling with the most scrupulous attention. Twice he walked the length of the passage counting his steps, and twice he descended to the yard to look up at the outward line of the house. At last he laid his hand upon a certain portion of the woodwork pressed, and I heard with a thrill that ran down my spine a faint creak of some hidden spring.
The panel swung inward by a few inches.
Aha, Watson, our missing space is beginning to justify itself.
We set our shoulders to the wood and forced it wide enough to admit a man. Behind was a narrow cavity, little more than a crack between the outer and inner skins of the house, with rough planks underfoot and the smell of dust and dry rot in our nostrils. By stooping we could creep along it, feeling with one hand the rough stone of the old wall and with the other the smooth boards of the new. At one point the passage widened slightly, and ahead there showed a fainter blackness that marked an opening. Holmes went first, moving with that panther-like suppleness which has more than once astonished me, and I followed as closely as the narrowness permitted, holding the candle high above my head. Presently he drew himself up, and I found myself beside him upon a tiny platform of planking that jutted out over the abyss. The night was black about us, the wind struck at us like a living thing, and far below I could hear the muffled rush of the stream. The house wall rose on one side of us, the naked face of the rock on the other, and beneath there was nothing that the eye could single out in the darkness. I confess that a cold sweat broke upon me as I realized that a false step or a loosened board would have sent us hurtling into the unseen void.
Steady, Watson, steady. This is no place for careless feet.
Even in that perilous position his voice was cool and unshaken. He knelt and passed the candle slowly along the planks and the lower part of the house wall. Upon one board I saw a dull, greasy stain that caught the light.
Collodion, if I mistake not. Our friend Hall has been here with his plates.
A little further on he pointed to a faint scratch upon the painted surface of the wall at the height of a man's knee, and to another on the planking as though made by the leg of a tripod.
He set his instrument, and from this point he commanded exactly that view of the valley which appears in our photograph. You perceive how the ridge rises, just so above the roof.
Even my unpracticed eye could see that his words were true. The position answered to the picture as a mould answers to its cast. Holmes now pressed his hand along the wall at the level of the scratches, and presently his fingers rested upon a place where the sound changed from the dull thud of solid timber to a hollower note.
The back of the strong box is, I think, no great way beyond this line.
He drew from his pocket a small metal tool such as a locksmith might use, and inserted it between two of the boards. With patient, delicate movements he worked it along, and little by little a strip of wood yielded and came away, revealing a narrow space behind. He thrust the candle into the gap, and I saw close against the inner side the steel back of the strong box with the marks of recent scratches upon its surface. From a crevice beside it he picked delicately with the point of his tool and brought forth a tiny sliver of glass upon which, as he held it to the light, there showed a fragment of a watermark and the ghost of a printed line.
A splinter from a photographic plate bearing the government watermark. Hall has been at work here in more senses than one.
I marvelled, not for the first time, at the thoroughness of the man's precautions and at the equal thoroughness with which Holmes pierced them.
We will go back now, Watson, before the housemaids find themselves short of 2 lodgers. I have seen enough for the moment, and I have no desire to add an inquest upon our own remains to the other complications of the case.
With infinite care, we retraced our steps along the precarious gallery and regained the corridor, where the candle flame shone again upon familiar walls and the floor seemed wonderfully solid beneath our feet. Once in our room, Holmes threw himself upon the bed and lay there staring at the ceiling, while I, still somewhat shaken by our late adventure, seated myself upon a chair and waited in silence.
You will have observed, Watson, that our impossible substitution has now become not only possible, but easy.
I begged him to enlighten me.
A man who is master of this concealed gallery can, any time when the house is quiet and the wind loud, make his way to the platform beside the strong box, remove a portion of the boarding, and so gain access to the back of the box itself. If the back plate has been previously weakened or prepared, he can, with tools concealed in his camera tripod, remove it sufficiently to withdraw the document and to insert another in its place. That done, he replaces the plate, draws back into his burrow, and no human eye is any the wiser.
It was as clear as daylight when he put it so, and I wondered that I had not instantly grasped the whole scheme.
We have then to ask who among the occupants of the house knew of this gallery and possessed the nerve and skill to use it. The servants and Sir Alastair appear to have been ignorant of its existence, and I see nothing in the young clerk to suggest that he would crawl along a plank above 100 feet of darkness. There remains Mr. Victor Hall, whose recreation it is to hang by his fingers upon the edges of cliffs and to photograph abysses.
I could not but agree that the net seemed to close about that gentleman.
We must now consider motive, and here again Mr. Hall presents a promising figure. A quiet man of independent means meeting our indebted baronet at a club frequented by persons of more fashion than fortune is a type which has its own significance. You will remember, Watson, the racing receipts which played their little part in the Silver Blaze affair.
I nodded, recalling how the tragic case had turned in part upon such documents.
I shall send 2 telegrams, one to my friend at the betting offices and one to Scotland Yard. We must know what dealings Mr. Hall has had with the turf, and we must arrange that he does not leave the country until we are ready to speak with him.
Holmes wrote rapidly upon a telegraph form and descended to the little office at the station from which the boy carried his messages away along the valley. The next day was one of anxious waiting. Holmes revisited the gallery by daylight and made a more minute examination of the marks upon the planks and upon the back of the strong box, while I busied myself with certain measurements of the interior at his direction.
Towards evening a messenger arrived with telegrams from London.
Holmes read them with that impassive countenance which conceals so much, but I could see by the tightening of his lips that his expectations had been realized.
Our friend Mr. Hall has had a very pretty career upon the race course. He has lost heavily, has been repeatedly upon the verge of bankruptcy, and 3 days after he left this house there was paid into his account a sum which cleared every debt. The money came from a foreign bank, acting upon cable instructions from the capital of the power which would have gained most by the altered clause in the convention.
The chain seemed complete. I ventured to ask what news had come from Scotland Yard.
Lestrade has proved himself prompt and efficient. He has caused Hull to be detained at Charing Cross upon his way to the continent, and has discovered in his luggage a set of photographic plates bearing the text of the genuine convention, together with certain correspondence which will, I think, be of interest to the Foreign Office.
It was arranged that Lestrade should bring his prisoner with him to the lodge upon the following day, and that Sir Alastair and Mr. Elphinstone should be present when Holmes unfolded his conclusions. The morning broke clearer, and patches of blue showed between the ragged clouds. The mountain tops shone with a bleak glory, and the air was keen and pure as we waited before the house for the arrival of the carriage. Presently we saw it climbing the last turn of the road, and upon the box sat the familiar wiry figure of Inspector Lestrade.
Good morning, Mr. Holmes. I have brought your man and a pretty lot of trouble he seems likely to give to those who have made use of him.
You have him secure, I trust.
As secure as handcuffs and 2 of our best men can make him. He is inside and mighty sulky.
We repaired to the Hall, where Sir Alastair, pale and stern, and Mr.
Elphinstone, no less anxious, awaited us.
2 constables entered, escorting between them a man whose appearance recalled at once the figure which I had seen in the photograph. Victor Hall was of middle height, thin, with a lean, brown face and steady, rather hard eyes which met ours without flinching. His clothes were plain, but well cut, and there was about him an air of contained energy, which made it easy to picture him swinging along a ledge with a precipice beneath.
Mr. Hall, you have done your country, and another country some service, though it is the latter which has shown itself more generous in its rewards.
I do not recognize your right to question me. If I have offended against the law, there are legal forms by which that can be determined.
Quite so, and you will have the advantage of them in due time. In the meanwhile, it may interest you to learn in what manner your little enterprise has been seen through.
Holmes drew up a chair at the table, laid before him the architect's plan and the 2 photographs, and with Sir Alastair, Mr. Elphinstone, Lestrade, and myself as his audience began in his quiet, precise fashion to unfold the whole story.
When Sir Alastair and his colleagues came to this house, the Foreign Office believed that the wall behind the strong box in the study was backed by solid rock. In reality, as the original builder and Mrs. Price could have told them, the house has been extended outward over the ravine, leaving between the old masonry and the new timber a narrow gallery along which a man may pass. That gallery, reached by a concealed panel in the corridor, leads to a small platform from which a certain very fine view of the valley may be obtained. Our friend Mr. Hall, being a lover of such views, had his camera ready to take advantage of it. It was the existence of that view recorded in this photograph which first drew my attention to the fact that there must be some part of the structure unaccounted for by the plan. Having assured myself of the gallery's existence and of its relation to the back of the strong box, I had next to consider how it might have been used. The back of the box has been tampered with, as these scratches show, and a portion of the planking removed from the wall in front of it, as the marks of a tool testify. A fragment of a photographic plate bearing the watermark of the government lies between the box and the wall, and upon the plank of the platform there is a stain of collodion and the scratches of a tripod leg. From these facts it is plain that someone, armed with the knowledge of the gallery and provided with camera and chemicals, has reached the back of the box and photographed its contents. He has then substituted for the genuine sheet a forged copy of extraordinary excellence, prepared beforehand in London by photographic and penman-like skill, the lettering transferred and retouched so that the alteration of a single clause should escape, or but the closest scrutiny.
As he spoke, I saw that Sir Alastair's hands gripped the arms of his chair until the knuckles showed white, while Mr.
Elphinstone, leaning forward, drank in every word as a man drinks water in a desert.
Who could have done this thing? Not the servants, who knew nothing of the gallery. Not Sir Alastair, whose courage fails him upon the edge of a balcony, and whose code, for all his follies, does not include the selling of his country's honour. Not the young clerk, whose nerves are unequal to so perilous a journey, and whose skill, though considerable, does not extend to forgery of this class. There remains Mr. Victor Hall, who professes mountaineering, who's never seen without his camera, who took this particular photograph from this particular impossible angle, and who left the house soon afterwards with an eagerness which suggests that he had no wish to be present when the discovery was made.
Hall's lips twitched for an instant, but he preserved his outward composure.
Motive is not lacking. Mr. Hall has for some time been the victim of a passion for the turf. He has lost heavily, has been hunted by creditors, and has seen the comfortable income which he once possessed sink to nothing under his own folly. 3 days after he left this house there was paid into his account a sum sufficient to clear every debt. The money comes ultimately from the capital of the power which would have gained most by the altered clause. In his luggage, examined by Inspector Lestrade, there have been found plates bearing copies of the genuine draft and correspondence, which shows beyond question that he was in the pay of that power. I submit, gentlemen, that the case is complete.
There was a moment's silence, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the soft hiss of the peat. Sir Alastair sprang to his feet.
Then I am cleared. Mr. Holmes, if what you say is true, I owe you more than any man can owe another.
You owe it rather to Mr. Elphinstone, who refused to accept the easy solution and insisted that the best brains available should be employed before a gentleman was branded as a traitor.
I have but done my duty.
You are all very clever, no doubt, and you have spun your web with much skill. Yet I deny that you have the right to judge me. There are nations as well as men who play their games for high stakes, and I have but followed the example set by governments.
You will find, Mr. Hall, that governments also have prisons when the games go awry.
You may leave the moralizing to the gentleman, Mr. Hall, and save your breath for the judge. You will come along with us now.
The prisoner shrugged his shoulders with an affectation of indifference, though I saw the pallor deepen upon his cheek. He was led away between the constables, and a moment later we heard the carriage roll from the door. Sir Alastair, whose emotion had for the instant carried him beyond his usual self-control, now sank once more into his chair and passed his hand over his eyes.
I cannot forget, Mr. Holmes, that my own weaknesses opened the door for that fellow's approach. Had I not been the needy fool that I was, he would never have chosen me for his companion, and this scandal had never come near me.
A man who lives beyond his means, Sir Alastair, is a standing invitation to the enemies of his country. You have had a sharp lesson. It rests with you whether you profit by it.
Mr. Elphinstone rose and held out his hand to Holmes.
I shall take back to London not only the salvation of a department but a proof, if any were needed, that there are services which no departmental routine can replace. The genuine draft, compared with the cipher minutes, will now be substituted, and the other will go where it deserves.
You will be wise to let as little of this affair be known as may be. The public will sleep none the worse for being ignorant of how near it came to waking upon a very ugly quarrel.
With these arrangements made, and our task accomplished, we left the house which clung so perilously to the mountainside. As we drove down the winding road, the lodge shrank and faded behind us until it was but a dark speck upon the grey face of the hill. The valley widened, the air grew softer, and the familiar signs of civilization returned to meet us. Holmes was for some time sunk in thought, his brows drawn and his fingers twined together. At last he spoke.
You perceive, Watson, how often in these matters it is not the thing which a man wishes to conceal that betrays him, but the thing which he cannot resist displaying. Our friend Hall may have crept to his gallery by night and done his work in darkness, yet he must needs indulge his vanity by taking a fine photograph from a dramatic position. That picture has been the thread by which we have drawn the whole scheme to light.
It is not the first time, Holmes, that vanity has proved the undoing of a criminal.
Nor will it be the last, my dear fellow. Human nature remains much the same, whether it expresses itself in a country house or in a mountain lodge, in a forgery, or in a stolen jewel.
It was upon such reflections that we journeyed back to London, where the case, so far as the public was concerned, was quietly hushed up, and where Sir Alastair, though spared the brand of traitor, never wholly recovered the shadow that had fallen across his name.
For some years the affair remained locked in my memory and in a certain dispatch box which lies, as I write, in the corner of my study.
It is only now, when the actors have passed and the political conditions which gave it importance have shifted, that I feel at liberty to set it down among those untold cases which show my friend at his highest. If you have followed me thus far, you will have seen once more how the keen eye, the patient logic, and the indomitable courage of Sherlock Holmes could pierce through the most carefully woven intrigue, and could wrest from shadows the facts upon which the fate of nations might depend. And now, my dear listener, before we part, let me lay aside for a moment the role of chronicler and speak to you more directly. I am deeply obliged to you for accompanying Holmes and myself to that lonely Welsh mountain and for remaining with us to the very end of the story.
If you have taken pleasure in this narrative, may I invite you to mark your goodwill by pressing the like button which accompanies this recording.
Should you desire to hear further adventures from the Untold store of Holmes's cases, I would earnestly beg you to subscribe to this channel so that you may be promptly informed when the next chronicle is released. Your comments too are of real interest to me, for through them I may learn which aspects of these events most engage your curiosity and sympathy. If you feel moved to support this humble endeavour more directly, you will find a means to do so by following the instructions connected with the small QR code visible at the lower right of the video, or by using the link which is provided in the description beneath. In that same description you will also discover references to other works which belong to a quite different series of tales, and which may perhaps afford you variety when you desire a change from Baker Street and its problems. For the present I bid you a very cordial farewell, and I trust that we may soon meet again when I take up my pen to relate another of the untold cases of Sherlock Holmes.